that no one Nigerian is bigger than all of Nigerians. The subtle threat that if one person is removed and the rule of law is observed will bring anarchy is unheard of and cannot be tolerated.
As most of you know, I'm not someone who runs away or backs down from a fight. So a state of media war now exists between me and the tin pot tyrant masquerading as the President of Nigeria. I will not rest until he is stripped from office, having fraudulently obtained it. I don't say that because he was a bagman for the mafia in Chicago, that necessarily disqualifies him as President of Nigeria. That's a matter for the Nigerian people, not for me. But when I discover, as I have discovered, that the documents he submitted were literally fraudulent, that he had no legal right even to be on the ballot, and that the ballot itself was rigged, then I have to stand with the people of Nigeria. There is, of course, the possibility, only a possibility, that the judiciary in Nigeria will do their duty, will refuse to tolerate this farce now that the evidence is in. It's not all in because the United States refuses to part with, for the time being, the documentation that would prove it beyond any possibility of contradiction. But the leaking of parts of that documentation and the securing of enough evidence already renders his presidency null and void. And that's why in Nigeria, and I hope to encourage everywhere in the world, the slogan, "All eyes on the judiciary," must now be raised by all those who wish the best for the people of Nigeria, for the people of Africa.
Good day, viewers. This election petition seeking to disqualify Tinubu as the president of Nigeria is so complicated. It is complicated because this is not all about the judges doing the right thing now. It is all about the people knowing the right thing. The people already knows what is right. They already know what has transpired all this while. Even the international communities and the world as well. They knows that the certificate Tinubu presented to court is forgery. So they knows about so many things that is underground going on. Do not be surprised on how this case will be delaying. The judiciary, I believe, in my own understanding, that they are going to uphold the constitution at the end because this is too much.
And today's World Press Conference, we'll be looking at two important issues. Why did we invite you here? First, we know that recently we had elections in Nigeria. The election has come and gone, but we are not over yet with the outcome. Secondly, recently we had an incident in Niger Republic, and it is a current affair. And as members of the African community living abroad, with presence across the African continent, we want to lend our voice to these issues. But before we go on, first on the agenda, as I mentioned, is about the elections and the ongoing election petition at the election petition tribunal. It is important that I mention to you first that this press conference is to give voice to the letter that have already been sent to the election petition tribunal. And I want to also mention that apart from the election petition tribunal, there were organizations and institutions that were also copied. That includes the Chief Justice of Nigeria, the President of the Court of Appeal, the National Judicial Council, So before holding this press conference today, this has been sent to them and this was properly acknowledged. And they haven't acknowledged the receipt of this letter, which you can see here. You can see them all stamped here. This is their stamp. This is an acknowledgement copy. We are now here to emphasize what we have sent here so that the broader community, African community, will hear us. But before we go ahead, let me reintroduce. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa is a Pan-African organization established as a vehicle to mobilize African diaspora across the world, outside the African continent, to organize and deploy people of African descent, their competencies, resources, and social capital to redeem the African homeland from its state of underdevelopment. Let me also say, why are we holding this conference here today? Knowing that this is an African-wide organization, you must know, or we must reemphasize, that as is known all over the world, 1 in every 4 Africans is a Nigerian. And I can tell you that across Africa, everybody is looking up to Nigeria, even the world in general. Whatever happens in Nigeria have domino effect across Africa. Therefore, diaspora Africans decided that this should start in Nigeria and then get across to other parts of Africa. Like you can see today what is also happening in Niger. Apart from the fact that the current president of Nigeria is the chair of ECOWAS, Nigeria is being looked up to amongst other ECOWAS countries to actually lead the action in Niger. Hence, the diaspora community believes that whatever that is done in Nigeria will have domino effect across Africa. That is why Nigeria is the official signal for this organization. And as I mentioned, 2 important things we are dealing with here today is Nigerian government and the judiciary, and we are here to ask them to respect the wishes of Nigeria, even as we look forward to the judgment that is going to come from the election petition tribunals across Nigeria. Now, let me go further without wasting your time to mention that the 2023 Nigerian presidential election has moved from the ballot to the courtroom. The results from Nigeria's general election were under scrutiny in May 2023 as court considered several of the petitions we have in these petition tribunals from the state to the federal. It is important to emphasize that even in the Electoral Act, the election is inconclusive without this process that is ongoing right now. We all know that the election petition tribunals are part and parcel of the elections. If the Constitution were to be rejected, we are not supposed to have governors, members of the National Assembly, or anybody install the president until this process is exhausted. But coincidentally, where we are now in our trajectory, political trajectory, this process is included, yet somebody has to be installed so there won't be no vacuum. Hence, we have some people at the National Assembly whose cases are the tribunal, people who are sitting as governors whose cases are the tribunal, and somebody overseeing Nigeria as a president who is still at the presidential election tribunal. That notwithstanding, it is important now to know that the Presidential Election Tribunal particularly, whose outcome will have stronger effects on Nigeria's democracy and governance, has become a subject of attention. And recently, as we can see, there are ongoing campaigns, all eyes on the judiciary, of which, as of day before yesterday, we have seen an attempt to muzzle out that voice. But we must say that we find it challenging that in a democracy which emphasizes free speech, that citizens saying that all eyes on the judiciary should be a subject which will be, alluded to be a suggestive idea for anarchy. It is surprising that those who believe in the tenets of democracy are actually opposed to freedom of speech, to the extent that the citizens say that all eyes are on the judiciary has become a subject for which some people have been termed anarchists. But that is unfortunate. But we're here today to say that we believe strongly that the judges know that in the history of Nigeria, no other election tribunal has raised the consciousness of Nigerians more than the 2023 presidential election, which they are currently presiding over. We have seen tribunals, we have seen election adjudicatory processes in the times past. But I will tell you that no other time in Nigerian history has it been this consensus. Now, many Nigerians, both home and abroad, and even beyond Nigeria, in fact, if you watch some foreign media, till tomorrow, they are subject of social discourse. As of Sunday, we had a very prominent former British member of parliament, George Galloway, having a world media platform where Nigeria's democracy and the ongoing tribunal was discussed. That's to tell you that, unlike before, Nigeria has become a subject of international attention strongly. Hence, the judges at the tribunal knows that, like no other time in Nigerian history, it has become a subject of interest, and this is one of the things we want to emphasize. Arising from the discussions we have had with so many Nigerians and also other Africans, because as a diaspora organization covering the entire Africa, and Nigeria being a country whose activities have dominant effect across Africa, whatever happens in Nigeria has become a subject of great interest to us. So having discussed with Nigerians, having had these various interactions, because if their verdict fails to satisfy the requirements of justice, it may detonate the youth in Nigeria. We have to emphasize that. And this is why we are paying attention, and we are also using this opportunity before anything goes wrong to call the attention of everybody to that. Hence, we agree with one of the authors in this ongoing subject, Reverend Father John Ode, who wrote, and I quote, "The lessons we can learn from the NSAS protest and the 2023 election is this: when the people are pained and pinned against the wall of despair, when they are unjustifiably compelled to be poor, miserable, and hopeless, when they are systematically denied of their sources of decent living, when they can no longer trust their leaders, when they have justifiable reasons to be angry, when they cannot trust the police as the guardians of the law and order, when the law that should be their last hope turns around to become their worst enemy, with the result that they cannot trust the justice system. And finally, when the nation itself ignores justifiable rage of the neglected younger generation, as it happened during the NSAS protests of October 2020 and during the electoral savagery of 2023 elections, there is the threat of some violent implosion or explosion unless the situation is redressed. Therefore, we need to emphasize that Nigerians have been patient because they believe in the rule of law and because they understand that even the election petition tribunals are part of the electoral process. And in exhausting these processes, they want to see justice. Nigerians cannot continue to be taken for granted. Like I have emphasized, that for the simple reason of raising a banner, calling on the attention of the judiciary to say that all eyes are on you, some people are already threatening anarchy. You can't guard the people in a democracy and claim to be a democracy. And we want to emphasize that today. The judiciary is the only institution that has all it takes to save this country from the threat of implosion. All eyes have been on the judiciary because of Nigeria's respect for the rule of law. It does not mean that the members of the Presidential Election Tribunal are in a better position in this case to tell Nigerians the person who won the presidential election. Nigerians do not wait for the court to tell them the winner of any election. It is the electorate that should tell the court because they know more than the court. Nigerians voted. In fact, let me emphasize here that without prejudice to any party, whether in power or out of power, that every political party had what they call situation room. In their situation rooms, they had election collection centers from different wards to local governments, to states, and to the federal. And I don't think those challenging the outcome of the election are ignorant of what they are saying. And if you have listened to various political parties, they will tell you that the result they have on hand differs from what INEC have announced, despite the fact that INEC have insisted that they have done their job well. Hence, according to the electoral law, it now falls on the judiciary. But we want the judiciary to know that it is not as if Nigerians did not know who they voted for. It's not as if Nigerians did not witness some of their comrades being denied the opportunity to vote in certain parts of Nigeria. It's not as if Nigerians are not aware that over 80 people were killed, maimed during the last election. It is not as if Nigerians do not know that some people were stabbed. Of election in certain places were not as even announced in the polling unit. Hence, what Nigerians simply expect the judiciary to do is to take all this to cognizance in what? In delivering justice. We deplore the threat by a candidate in the election against the judiciary that if he is removed for not measuring up to the demands of the electoral law of the land, there will be chaos and anarchy. Nobody is bigger than this country. Nigeria belongs to all Nigerians. The use of threats, the use of subtle threats is anti-democratic. And we want to emphasize it here that the diaspora community, African diaspora community, will not tolerate that. And let me say this, for those who may think that, what is this African diaspora community all about? Why are they involved? Why are they interested? If you listen to the Central Bank Governor of Nigeria as of day before yesterday or 2 days ago, you will hear him make reference to diaspora remittances as part of their strategic plan in mitigating the floundering exchange rate of the naira. A community of Nigerians that remit over $22 billion into this economy, where the national annual export value is $18 billion, has greater impact on this country, more than many people can. They are Nigerians who have lived here, who have relations here, who have come here every day, who have investments here. They are Africans who want their home countries to grow. Hence, they are critical stakeholders and must be respected. And they are here to say that no one Nigerian is bigger than all of Nigerians. The subtle threat that if one person is removed and the rule of law is observed will bring anarchy is unheard of and cannot be tolerated, irrespective of who that person is. Some people have ruled this country before and they are no more here. Some have ruled the country at the level of states, they are no more their state governors. Some are in government today, they will not be here tomorrow. But one thing that is consistent is that this country will remain, and no one person's interest or position or ambition should be more than and greater than this, the interest of this country. And let me say that, having said that the removal may instigate anarchy, we must also say that those who are calling for anarchy should be careful, because we know that no person has the monopoly of violence. As much as we recognize that today, on various social media platforms and media, we have seen some of the unwitting talks, please emphasize, unwitting talks, who have been supporting some of these candidates, given opportunity to appear in the villa and given opportunity to speak on issues concerning Nigeria. Some of these people, non-state actors, have threatened other Nigerians on behalf of some of these candidates. And we are in a democracy. And I guess these are some of the things that are given impetus to the statement that if some people are removed, there will be anarchy in the land. But we want to remind them, as I said earlier, that Nigeria is bigger than anybody, and no Nigerian is greater than anybody. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa wants the world to know that that will not be tolerated. In a nutshell, no matter how or whatever the opinions might be, we encourage the judiciary to do the right thing. The judicial process is part of the electoral process, irrespective of the fact that we have some people that have already been inaugurated as governors, senators, president. It does not remove from the fact that the judicial process is part of the process, and some people think it's a fait accompli because they have been inaugurated. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa is saying that is not the truth. We must see that the right thing is done. Secondly, we did mention the ongoing issue in Niger. Niger is a hot button issue for ECOWAS, and now we have various interests, both local and international, trying to intervene. And as Africans living across the world, outside the continent, Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa, they are interested in what is happening in Niger. Because today, the crisis that started in Libya have ravaged the entire Sahel and may actually have been intrinsically involved in the crisis in Niger today. And as Africans who are making their contributions to the development of their countries and Africa, we have a say here. And this is why we're saying that the regional leaders indeed have had their emergency meetings, and President Tinubu, being the chair of ECOWAS, have also made the world to know what is on the table, including the use of military force, and has actually spoken about a standby force by ECOWAS as one of the options on the table. We all cherish democracy. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa believes in democracy, actually wants democracy. But when we have interactable issues like this on our continent, the ways and measures we take to deal with them, to ameliorate the situation, is critical. We already have many conflicts in different parts of Africa. That is what stunting development, undermining growth, and also bringing economic hardship from Libya to Sudan to Mali to Burkina Faso to Niger, even to Nigeria. And if you look at the trajectory, before the year 2003, 2004, there were less than 15% incidents of terrorist attack in Africa. But in fact, since after the fall of Libya and the ongoing crisis in Libya, you have had more than 2,000 terrorist attacks on the continent of Africa. What are the issues that are prelude to this matter? Some of them were as a result of the political crisis in some of the African countries that were not managed well. When we had issue in Libya, and the issue in question was about how to institutionalize democracy, rather than go through the diplomatic means, Africans allowed foreign interests. They allowed external influence to engage in Africa, to the extent that 6 presidents representing the AU, who are sent on a mission to go and find peace in Africa, were stopped by foreign interests from going into that mission, threatening to shoot down their aircraft. And that is very absurd in the 21st century. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa, coming from this background and of knowledge, hence wants to emphasize there is need to please emphasize and maintain the use of diplomacy in trying to settle the issues in Niger. There are a lot of intricate issues involved. Even right here in Nigeria, where we're seated, Nigeria shares over 900 miles border with Niger, with so many of those who constitute a large population of Nigerian population having relations in Nigeria. A crisis in Niger will affect Nigeria. A crisis in Nigeria will affect West Africa. A crisis in West Africa will affect Africa. As much as Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa wishes for the restoration of democracy in Niger, we want to emphasize that it is a very high-risk issue. In the words of Paul Ejime, an ECOWAS and AU conflict resolution consultant, he said, and I quote, "Apart from the possibility of a military confrontation escalating into a catastrophic war and the consequences of military intervention in the complex environment can be better imagined than experienced." When it happened in Libya, a country that had been a prosperous nation for over 30 years, at that time, emotions were high, reason were low. And eventually, the intervention have brought that country to its knees today and is affecting the whole of Africa. Today we can see the proliferation of light arms and weapons across the Sahel, even affecting the biggest economy in Africa, being Nigeria. Therefore, regardless of the position taken by various parties that have direct and tangential interests in Niger, primacy must be given to dialogue and diplomacy towards a resolution with minimal disruptive impact on Nigeria and the West African region. Whereas ECOWAS authorities have indicated that they remain open to various conflict resolution options, diplomacy should remain the overreaching imperative in resolving the potential crisis. The people of Niger must be allowed, via their national institutions, the opportunity to revert quickly to a representative democracy, while ECOWAS must seek to discourage the spread of military dictatorship in West Africa. The recourse to armed deterrence must be restrained by multilateral diplomatic mechanisms. Please, we want to re-emphasize. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa want to re-emphasize. Africa belongs to Africans. Africa belongs to Africans. As of this minute and as of this moment, despite the military interregnum, no blood has literally been shed in Niger. And any activity, any event, any involvement, any kind of engagement that will lead to the shed of blood in Niger, in West Africa, must be discouraged. We must recognize the relationship Africa has with the global world. The multilateral organizations, including the United Nations and other partner organizations like EU and the rest of them. Why that is the case? What has happened in Niger is an African affair, and Africa, throughout its history, have had a process for resolving conflict, including the use of arbitration processes. Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa is seizing this opportunity to emphasize what many experts, diplomats, and opinion mothers have said. Let's avoid what has happened in Libya that have turned the Sahel into the hotbed of terrorism in the world. Please, let's avoid any reason for which there will be arms and military intervention in Niger. Whatever diplomatic structure and strategy that have to be used must be used. Again, in conclusion, this press conference, as I told you, especially regarding the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal, before this press conference, we had already sent a letter to the tribunal, and this letter where we copied some institutions and representatives of some national institutions that have anything to do with it, including the CJN, NJC, and others alike. So we're not just having a press conference, we're actually highlighting what is already known around the institutions of judicial demands of diaspora action for democracy in Africa. And I must say, if you must know, taking example of Nigeria, a group of people that remits over $20 billion into the economy of a nation have a great say, and whatever they say must be respected, and that is why we are here today. Thank you for listening. God bless you. The first question was as to why the organization Diaspora Action for Democracy in Africa is coming up now with a press conference. We believe in democracy, we believe in judiciary, we believe in all the institutions of democracy. What we're simply doing is to give a voice to what is already happening. It is a reminder about the issues at stake. And there is no better time other than now. And we have also seen, especially in Nigeria, where even judgments were given, despite what everybody knows is the literal rule of law. I mean, not even amongst the cases that are yet to be decided, those that have been decided even within this period of election cycle, we had a case where some people who ran for presidential election, irrespective of the Electoral Act 2022 as amended, which does not permit people to run for 2 positions in one election cycle. You have had in this Nigeria where such people who ran, whose posters were everywhere, who ran not just for presidential election, stepped down from running for presidential primaries, went to be conferred with a ticket for a senatorial contest, where they were never known to be in that primaries. These are some of the aberrations we see.